we'll put it up on the website, and I encourage you to check back at the website probably later this week or early next week. We also have a lot of regular research papers, articles and other video interviews going up on our website on a fairly regular basis. So by all means, check in there and have a look at ruraleconomies.org.au. And like most of our public events, we'll have a format today where you'll be able to interact with the speakers. Trudy's going to moderate that. First of all, and our speakers, I'll just do a brief introduction. We're really pleased to welcome back Professor Jim Cavea at the University of Tasmania, but a long-time Queensland-based researcher. Jim has a long career in community engagement and translation regions, being US trained under Ron Schaefer. He's also been a strong mentor for and founding director of RECoE, and has guided our path, particularly down the translation and engagement. His offsider in his research piece today was Selena Ham, who is a researcher associated with RECoE, based out of USQ, who is a rural sociologist. And Selena's also had a long-standing career in rural economies and working with regions. And joined by them today is our great friend, Professor Harriet Babajan. And Harriet is based out of the Cairns Institute at James Cook University in Cairns, and she was actually the founding director of the Cairns Institute, and has a great and varied career in both government, state and federal, and local. And she was a former CEO of a local council up in Far North Queensland. So I welcome both of those today. And if I was Roy, and I'm glad Georgie Somerset's on the line. We didn't tell Roy and HG about this webinar because they'd be commentating by the side, because this is the clash of the titans. We've got Jim in Tasmania through to Harriet in Far North Queensland. And I've been really keen for RECoE to have an event like this where we can look at the digital connectivity aspect from a really varied but deeply rooted in place-based sort of inquiry. And I'll let those researchers go on a bit further. I don't want to steal their thunder, but it's been a fantastic opportunity to put this together. And with no further ado, I'll hand over to Trudy, who will then introduce and run our session. I'm just unmuting you, Trudy, Jim, and Selena and Harriet. Away you go.
Thanks, Ben, for the intro, and thanks everyone for getting online today in such a busy, crazy time. But I think, if anything, COVID has shown us that this topic is even more important for regional and rural Australia. Just for quick background on RDA, we're partly funded by the Department of Infrastructure. There's 52 RDAs across all of Australia, and I recognise we've even got some of the other RDAs online today, so thank you for joining. I've been asked to moderate this, so I'm really keen to get the presentations underway and get to questions as soon as we possibly can. So we're the Darling Downs Southwest RDA, and I must say I was very blessed to have had some time with Professor Jim Cavea as my chair. And I do remember being out at Thargomindah for a Southwest Red meeting just a couple of days after Jim and Selena had been doing some of this research a bit further north to Thargomindah, but they were sharing some of their anecdotal stories. So as much as today we'll get the professional summary of your research, I'm also keen to get some of those stories again shared with the group. So with that in mind, I am going to start with Harriet. Harriet's going to cover the connectivity and inclusion in Far North Queensland's agricultural communities and the work that she did there. Then we're going to flick to Jim and Selena, who are going to give us a summary on the social and economic impacts of digital connection in remote communities. And their area was Central Western Queensland. And then we'll get to do a few questions that I've got for the panellists, and then also feel free to jump in and add any comments at any stage. But then what we really want to do is get some questions from those of you who have dialed in today to listen to this research and how we can apply it across the very many and different bits of work we do for regional and remote Australia. So I'm going to flick to Harriet now to give us a summary of the work and the research that she did in Far North Queensland's agricultural communities.
Oh, oops, sorry. I just have to get my slides in order. I thought I was very organised. bear with me.
In the meantime, Harriet, you win the best background prize at today. This beautiful painting in the background.
Yes, it's from Lockyer Valley Aboriginal communities, and it's Pathways to Home. That's what that painting is. So I'm hoping you can see my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can, Harriet. Thank you.
Fabulous. So thank you very much. We have been doing digital connectivity, disruption, inclusion, economic and social inclusion. And for us, all of the work around economic development ties back to social and regional development. We don't see it as, you know, social separate to economic. Also, our work covers far North Queensland, but also Northern Australia. So some of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you, our research covers a range of areas. You will know that advances in technology offer a lot of opportunities. You've heard of this, you know, the broadband connectivity, the Internet of Things, etc. But they also pose a lot of risks and pose inequality risks as well. So my work, today's presentation is based on a study with the pastoral industry in far North Queensland, a digital connectivity study across Northern Australia, and a RECoE workforce policy paper, and a workforce policy for the Queensland Government. Some of these papers are online on the RECoE website. Also a number of consultations we've undertaken, and as a practitioner, for example, we were deliberating how we would bring about a smart council at one of the councils I worked at, and I acknowledge Callum from that council here. By way of introduction, I think we're in the midst of a fourth revolution, and globally we're facing a lot of complex challenges, COVID being an example, and also that rural and regional economies are not still. They're in transition, there's been structural shifts, there's dynamics, and access to ICT technologies are an essential part of both living and working in our societies, but also addressing our global challenges. Deloitte estimates that a third of the economy faces a big bang or a short fuse change in the next 5 years. So that's either incremental change or a big change. Also, 65% of our children will be in jobs that don't exist just yet. And some sectors are going to change faster than others. And I'm just going to show you a slide in a minute. So the way we're going to do business with our markets, with our lives, with our suppliers, is being changed at different paces. This is an example of the intensity of disruption across different industries. So the green is the current state of disruption, blue is what's coming, and the grey is not a digital one. And if you look at the 5 big industries, it's financial and insurance, information and ICT and media, retail, education, health and transport industries are going to be impacted by that big bang of technological change. And some of the areas of change include things like tasks being automated, outsourcing of business to other parts of the world using digital technologies, workforce impacts. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on in our research, the use of data, consumer choice, monetization of assets, etc. So impact on supply chains. What we found in our consultations across the region is regions are adapting at various speeds to technological and digital change. And there are different reasons for this, including infrastructure, including access, including affordability, and including ability. Some of the impacts that we're beginning to see are things like moving from paper-based systems to digital systems, or using tracking or GPS systems or sensors, small introductions of robotics, beginning to use data analysis, real data analysis, interconnected devices and so forth, energy-saving devices. But the sense from the sector is that the big bang, profound impacts have not hit across the board yet. I said that we took a digital inclusion focus. The benefits of the digital economy are not shared always equally, and this impacts on our work, our access to services, our civic participation. We're doing some research at the moment on COVID in our region, and we're seeing engagement and participation being impacted. In terms of digital inclusion, 3 aspects are important: affordability, access to digital technologies, and digital literacies and abilities to use them. And so when we went out to look at our studies, we focused on some of these key aspects. Other studies show that Australia is 4th place out of 42 on affordability, but we're way down the list in terms of internet speed. And more than 2.5 million people are still not online. And quite a lot of that is in the rural regional areas. Also, when we say digital inclusion, it's not just about having a laptop on your desk at home. It's about the way you can use these to enhance our economies, drive education, our well-being, and our employment. And that one of the things that we found, especially in the Northern Australian context, high Indigenous context, that there's huge connectivity between digital exclusion and other forms of social inequality. The digital index for rural areas is quite complex, and on the basis of rural areas, on the basis of income, education, the age gap, Indigenous status or other cultural status, and compared to capital status, people with disabilities, all of these have less access to digital inclusion along those affordability, access, and ability. The Australian capital city average is 62.4, and yet when you look at the various equality inclusion factors, you'll see that it's about 10 points and even more in some areas. Rural areas are 23.9%. And if we look at Queensland, you will see that a lot of Queensland is well below the national average in terms of digital inclusion. And even Southeast Queensland, all of Queensland in fact is. So the conclusion in terms of this is that wealthier, younger, more educated labour market participants and urban Australians enjoy much more digital inclusion than others. In terms of regional studies, there are a number of regional studies. I'm not going to go into them, but the one from our region, Far North Queensland Council of Regional Organisations, our FNQ-ROC, released a study of mobile coverage along the main routes across Far North Queensland. And we're not as remote as some parts of Northern Australia. Along the major routes, 5,100 kilometres in terms of 3G, 4G signal strength, and they found that 70% of the distance covered had no signal at all. This is our major beef roads, our tourism roads, the roads we travel every day. And the comparable statistic would be 1% in capital cities. So it goes to show the extent of differences across regions and metropolitan areas. So I'm rushing because I've only got 20 minutes. Our research, the first research is we looked at the pastoral industry in Far North Queensland. And some of the feedback we got is, I don't know what the fuss is about. I don't even know how to turn my computer on and I'm doing fine. The internet is no longer a luxury for us, said a Queensland farmer. When the internet doesn't work, our business stops, regional tourism operator. Our students are loving the subjects around drones in a school. The economy is getting left out if we don't have digital infrastructure. And many of our rural communities are in transition and digital connectivity is key, a policy maker. These reflect the range of attitudes across the community to ICT digital connectivity. So the first study focused on the North Gulf region, as I said, with the cattle pastoral industry, covered a number of shires, as you can see, Croydon, Etheridge, Cook Shire. And the key issues that we found is, one is problems with unreliable internet connectivity, slow speeds, data gapping. the most difficult areas were not the very remote places. Very remote places or the bigger stations set up their own infrastructure. It's the last mile outside of the town, 3 to 5 kilometres outside of the town, were the most hard hit areas with access, unreliability of access. Many households were with a number of providers layering up and multiple plans and multiple devices so that they can meet their need, which was quite costly and expensive. Affordability and availability of data plans to meet both business and household needs were identified as major problems. Most of the farmers said that they needed to do critical operations online, like livestock LPA registration, information around biosecurity, animal food and welfare, food safety, compliance. And so quite a lot of them were really severely impacted by the unreliability and affordability issues. Another important subgroup of people that came up were the transit communities. These are seasonal workers that come in for mustering or other, some cattle stations have fruits, etc. So seasonal workers, they were sometimes in very remote areas or in regional areas up to 6 months at a time with no or limited intermittent access. We also found significant gender differences. Women have used it for a lot more social networking, and women, especially in household farms, family businesses, were the business bookkeepers and managers of the business. And what we found is that they used it less for their social purposes. They got the children's work done, the business things done, and then finally, if there was time, they used it for themselves. We also found a range of attitudes across, technologies and adoption and digital technologies. There was a general expectation that there will be universal service obligations, that citizens in rural areas and regional areas would not get left out. So universal service obligations, and in some areas, many felt that this was not being met. Of course, everyone felt that there were opportunities afforded by digital technologies, but for a range of reasons, they're not able to capitalise on this. So this had impacts on supply chain efficiencies, attracting skilled workers that were digitally savvy, and enabling graziers to be able to compete with more tech-savvy operators within a national and international market. And many felt that they could not really do extensive forward planning and future planning that was impacted because of digital technologies. So that's very, the report is on the RECoE website. It's in a very quick way, I picked up the key issues that we found. The second piece of research, we've just finished this, the report's about to go live. It's a partnership between Charles Darwin, Queensland University of Technology, James Cook, and a number of private providers. Centre for Appropriate Technology and Premise were our partners. We looked at across North and Regional Development Australia, worked with us in this for across Northern Australia. And we looked at digital connectivity and communication analysis across Northern Australia. And we held numerous consultations, interviews and forums. And the picture is the Cairns Forum. We held one in Darwin as well, and one-to-one interviews. So the focus was on Northern Australia. Again, issues of reliable broadband and mobile services came up, infrastructure came up really strongly, physical gaps and also other social infrastructure gaps came out significantly. Some of the key things were access to NBN, or the lack of capacity of NBN. The satellites were high latency, whereas they needed low latency for using a range of software. Many felt they didn't have enough information about the technology, the antenna, the alternative systems they could set up, delayed repairs when things went wrong. And some companies set up private networks which worked well, but these were not more generally accessible to the community. Particularly the mining infrastructure was quite strong, but it wasn't openly accessible to communities. The other issue that emerged is social infrastructure was equally important, that digital connectivity was provided by social infrastructure such as libraries and not-for-profits and local government and health clinics. But many a time, while they provided this infrastructure, that wasn't their core focus. And so understanding the critical role and the role, the social cohesion and glue and access and affordability and skills development role of the social infrastructure is being underestimated, particularly across a wide range area, a large geographical area like Northern Australia. So many talked about the double jeopardy of remoteness and social exclusion, thin markets and impediments to attracting providers and scalability challenges linked with population critical mass. There was a need identified for much smaller and nimble private providers, and there are debates for and against this. In very remote communities, Aboriginal communities, there are legacy issues of what's been set up, what's not adequate anymore. The infrastructure that's needed has come up in a number of areas. Also, that the lack of connectivity had disproportional impacts on education capacity or the access to education, access to health, and impacting on regional development. The last mile access issues also came up in our research across Northern Australia, just outside of towns. Digital capacity, one important aspect is that many felt that there was a lack of focus on building digital capacity, homegrown capacity, and also significant employer feedback around difficulties of attracting people with digital capability, especially around some of the new technologies that are emerging, data analytics and use of technologies in industry. Gender, again, came up, and also cultural factors, because we're looking at Northern Australia, particularly what are the key, a number of key cultural factors emerged around use, access of internet in remote Indigenous communities. And some of the Indigenous communities are taking it upon themselves to look at these issues and to be proactive and engage in Indigenous-led development so that, the barriers of infrastructure, etc., don't hold them back. We took a deeper dive into two sectors, agriculture, so a lot of issues around farming in the digital age and competitiveness. Production productivity was identified as a key area in which technologies will impact. Paddock to consumer and access to markets was seen as significant. Differences between digital inclusion of large farming enterprises and family farms, the agribusiness infrastructure of the bigger corporate forms of agriculture were much better, that included access and skills, and less so for family farms. In the family farms, many sorted out their own digital needs or tried to troubleshoot. There were intergenerational impacts if young people had left the family environment and gone to bigger cities. And so there were some issues around skills and capacity to set themselves up, know what the alternatives are, have the digital literacy skills when younger people were not around in the family business. Data collection and use of data production for decision making was seen as important, but many identified significant gaps in their businesses around this. The workforce skills, I'm going to come to that, so I won't dwell on it. One of the things that emerged is people understand things like remote sensing, IoT, robotics, harvesting, etc., cameras, stock, virtual fencing, but a number of issues emerged around the need, how they could invest in this, especially if they don't have the digital literacy and understanding of this and how it could benefit them, or be able to afford to pay someone to do this and work with their business. So there was a bit of a reluctance to invest on this, especially for smaller enterprises if they could not see a return on the investment. In the health sector, we saw that rurality challenges and impacts on social outcomes for health. There's a whole body of research around rurality and impacts on health, life expectancy, access to services. Much of the healthcare is now beginning to be reliant on digital technology and skills, such as aged care monitoring of people that are isolated in their homes, patient management, health promotion, information scanning, disease surveillance, and of course, recently, COVID. But some of the problems that are emerging are things like clinics don't have reliable digital connectivity. Certainly up in far north, Cape and even beyond Torres Strait and over to the west, many clinics are still on paper-based systems, referrals. Part of this is to do with digital connectivity, but part of it is to do with attracting workforces, medical workforce with the skills. We heard stories of doctors that have been there a long time, but who've never built digital capability. So everything is still being faxed rather than doing email referral, for example. So significant skills and access issues, but at the same time, increasing importance of things like telehealth and e-health for health benefits in remote areas as models of service delivery and data capture. And all the other area was impacts on health supply chains, both in terms of delivery of materials, but also in terms of the workforce. We also found significant fragmentation in terms of policy responses. There isn't a unified vision across digital inclusion across Northern Australia. Different jurisdictions are doing different things, so the ecosystem is a bit patchy and siloed. There isn't a public-private correlation sufficiently. Many saw that the policy responses are, look, we'll just get Australia right and it'll trickle down to Northern Australia. And fragmentation across jurisdictions, duplication, and also, cross-purpose activities happening. Some identified the lack of evidence base of where should the interventions be. Certainly, the Northern Australia white paper has prompted some work. CRCNA are funding some research, and Infrastructure Australia did an audit of Australian infrastructure. So this work is beginning to emerge, and of course the Regional Australia Institute's doing some work as well. So there is some work emerging and evidence emerging, but it's still patchy across different areas. And many felt that the policy considerations should be twofold. How do we derive productivity and efficiency while still maintaining a fair and equitable society? So our third piece of research is we did a policy document for looking at workforce in rural regional Queensland. This is now available on our website at the RECoE website. This was done late last year. We consulted with a lot of organisations in doing this. Many people, there's this stereotype that rural and regional Australia is pessimistic and they don't want change and they're stuck in their ways. We absolutely found no evidence of that. People are really optimistic about the benefits that digital change can bring. They saw opportunities. They saw that technology can lead to job losses, but they believe that this would be offset by new work, new types of jobs that are emerging. The main concern across a broad sector of people in different industries, agricultural, human services, even in policy, is the concern is not that disruption and change is coming, but are we going to be able to respond quick enough? Are we going to retrain quick enough? Are we going to have talent and workforce continuity when now, particularly, the digital skills are, there's a global competition for these skills of the workforce. So that was one concern that emerged in the workforce. The second is the equity considerations of technological change. Women are more likely to be in jobs. I showed you those industries where the changes are. Women are more in those industries, casual, and when they are automated, are they going to be able to retrain quick enough to be able to take part in the labour market. The other is those areas that are getting highly automated and those that aren't. Is there going to be a fear of job polarisation with high-paying, high-skilled jobs and then low-paying jobs? And what are the impacts of this kind of job polarisation in rural areas? And so the other is perceptions of work are changing. One policy officer said, oh, young people just want to fund their lifestyle. They no longer see that they have to be wedded to a corporation for a lifetime. They can work from anywhere. It's about access to jobs from any scale, any location, and any organisation. What we found in terms of skills in need are technological skills, digital literacy, data management, data coding, cybersecurity, and those sorts of jobs. But coupled with this is soft skills. So employers and senior sector people were telling us they need soft skills around communication, creativity, innovation, leadership, use of and applying information, problem solving and teamwork. So they were some of the key workforce considerations that are coming out. So the workforce change, both internet and new technologies are going to change the way we do work. CEDA says 40% of jobs will be likely to be automated in the next 5 years. New jobs emerging, the job polarisation, and the Productivity Commission believes that the struggle is going to be adjusting our existing skill sets to the demands, but also flexible work environments, but less reliable and possibly more casualised work options. As we head, I'm just trying to come to a conclusion. What does this all mean? I mean, we're situated in a global environment of big population increases. We're looking at 10 billion by 2030. Everything is instant. We have global challenges. Consumer demand is more instant. We're also seeing a corporatisation of what we call the civil sphere and our life worlds. So our civic participation is decreasing or being much more monitored. And so the role of digital technologies in our markets, in our own lifestyle, and in the way we have social cohesion and health outcomes is going to be growing as we develop. Now, through our studies, we did make recommendations short-term to government. I like the New Zealand one. It has 4 kind of areas of motivation, understanding how people's attitude to technology, access, which is the 3 digital connectivity inclusion measures, skills, and then trusting digital technologies, and some safety nets. So I like the way they've done that. That's one policy response. There are lots of others, and I guess this is a space that we're going to have to engage in as local government, as federal and state government, as key industry organisations. And I guess what I'm saying is that digital inclusion is going to have significant impacts for rural and regional Australia, is already having. It's both relational and distributional. That is how we do and relate to each other in business, in our economies, in our societies, but also what are the outcomes for equity and inclusion. We need to work towards a range of inclusions in our economics, in our society, in infrastructure and psychology of inclusion, but we need to develop frameworks that would enable us to capitalise on these benefits of technology in a sustainable way. And I believe, and our research shows, that partnerships across both public, private, government, community are really critical for going forward. Thank you. And sorry it was a bit rushed.
Thanks, Harriet. That's